My brother called me a thief for raising his kids. Now they choose me over him. I never thought I'd end up raising someone else's children, but life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges at you. I'm 45 now, and looking back at how everything unfolded still feels surreal. Sometimes I sit in my living room, looking at the photos of the kids growing up, and wonder how we all got here. My younger brother Tom was always the wild child in our family. While I focused on my studies and career, he dropped out of high school at 17 to move in with his wealthy girlfriend, Sarah. Our parents tried to talk sense into him, but Tom made it clear he didn't want their advice or interference in his life. He was sure he had it all figured out because Sarah's family had money, and he thought that was all he needed to succeed in life. I remember the day he packed his bags and left. Mom was crying, Dad was silent, and I just stood there, watching my little brother walk away from his future. He didn't even look back. That's just how Tom was. Once he made up his mind about something, there was no changing it. At 19, Tom and Sarah had twins, 2 beautiful girls. A year later, they welcomed a boy. I remember visiting them occasionally in their fancy apartment, paid for by Sarah's family. While everything looked perfect on the surface with their matching outfits and expensive toys, I could sense trouble brewing. Tom had no job, and was completely dependent on Sarah's family money. He'd spend his days playing video games, or hanging out with his friends while Sarah's parents paid all their bills. I tried talking to him about getting a job, or at least finishing his education, but he'd just laugh it off. "Why should I work when we have everything we need?" he'd say. I knew this attitude would come back to bite him someday, but he wouldn't listen to anyone. The relationship lasted until the twins were 4, and their brother was 3. Sarah had been cheating on Tom with someone from her college, and when everything came to light, they split up. She agreed to pay child support, but wanted nothing to do with raising the kids. She signed away her parental rights, leaving Tom alone with 3 young children. That's when our family had to step in. I was doing okay financially, not rich, but stable enough to help out. I had a steady job as an office manager, and while I couldn't support 4 people entirely, I could contribute some money each month. Our parents contributed what they could from their retirement savings, but they were getting older and couldn't do much beyond providing some money each month. Tom struggled to find work, which wasn't surprising given his lack of qualifications. Without a high school diploma or any work experience, his options were limited to minimum wage jobs. He needed someone to watch the kids while he worked, but couldn't afford regular childcare. Sometimes I'd help, sometimes our parents would step in, but it was never enough. There were many days when Tom had to call in sick because he had no one to watch the kids. I started spending more time at their apartment, and what I saw worried me. The place was always a mess, with clothes everywhere and dishes piling up in the sink. The kids often wore the same clothes for days, and homework was rarely done. Tom seemed overwhelmed and frustrated, but instead of trying to improve things, he started going out more, leaving the kids with whoever would watch them. As years passed, I noticed concerning changes in how Tom treated the kids. He seemed to blame them for his difficulties in finding a new partner. He'd go on dates, but wouldn't mention having children until several weeks in. When these relationships inevitably ended, he'd take his frustration out on the kids, telling them they were the reason he couldn't be happy. The worst part was hearing him tell the kids they were just like their mother, unwanted and troublesome. He'd say things like, "Your mother left because she couldn't stand being around you," or "No one wants to date someone with 3 kids." The children would come to me crying, asking if they were really that terrible. It broke my heart every time. I became their safe space. Whenever things got tough at home or they had problems at school, they'd come to me. The twins, especially, would often show up at my apartment after school, saying they didn't want to go home yet. They couldn't talk to their dad about anything. He'd either dismiss their concerns or turn it into a lecture about how they'd ruined his life. Our parents were too old to handle the emotional needs of young children, so I stepped up. I never married or had kids of my own. It just wasn't the path I chose, but I developed a special bond with my nieces and nephew. I'd help them with homework, attend their school events, and most importantly, just listen when they needed someone to talk to. Their dad was physically present but emotionally absent, always chasing relationships that ended the same way, with him hiding his role as a father until it was too late. I wanted to do more. Sometimes I thought about seeking custody, but the situation was complicated. Tom wasn't physically abusive or neglectful in ways that would clearly justify removing the kids from his care. He provided food and shelter, and on paper, he was doing what a parent should. The emotional damage he was causing wasn't something I could easily prove in court. More importantly, I worried that if I tried to take legal action and failed, Tom might prevent me from seeing the kids altogether. That would leave them completely alone with no support system. So I chose to remain their aunt, their confidant, their escape, whatever they needed me to be. I documented everything quietly, every cruel comment, every missed school event, every time he left them alone, just in case I ever needed it, but I hoped it wouldn't come to that. The years passed this way, with me watching these kids grow up under the shadow of their father's resentment. I did what I could to provide stability and love, hoping it would be enough to counteract the damage being done at home. I made sure they knew my door was always open, that they always had a place to go where they were wanted and loved. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I should have done more, but at the time, being there for them seemed like the safest choice. Everything changed when the twins turned 18. I remember that day clearly because it was also their high school graduation. Tom showed up late to the ceremony, barely paying attention as his daughters walked across the stage. He left early, saying he had a date, leaving me to take pictures and celebrate with them. That evening, both girls showed up at my apartment with their brother, who was 17 at the time. They had packed bags with them. "We can't live with him anymore," one of the twins said. "Can we stay with you?" I didn't hesitate to say yes. I had an extra bedroom and a pull-out couch in my home office. We could make it work. Tom's reaction was exactly what I expected, pure rage. He showed up at my door the next morning, screaming about how I had stolen his children. "I wasted 18 years raising them," he yelled. "And now you're taking them away?" I wanted to point out that he hadn't really raised them at all. They had practically raised themselves while he was busy chasing relationships and feeling sorry for himself. The kids stayed in their rooms during his outburst. They'd seen enough of his tantrums over the years. When he finally ran out of steam, I simply told him that the twins were adults now and could make their own choices. His son would be 18 in a few months, and he could make his own choice then too. Tom stormed out that day, and that was the last we saw of him for a long time. He blocked all our numbers, even our parents. I guess in his mind, we had all betrayed him by not forcing his children to stay with him. The kids seemed relieved rather than upset by his disappearance. Life settled into a new routine. The twins started community college, working part-time jobs to help with expenses. Their brother finished his senior year of high school, spending weekends with us and weekdays at his dad's house, though Tom was rarely home anyway. As soon as he turned 18, he moved in with us too. I helped them apply for student loans and scholarships. We spent evenings around my kitchen table, filling out forms and discussing their dreams for the future. One of the twins wanted to become a teacher, the other dreamed of owning her own business. Their brother had his heart set on medical school. I encouraged all of them, helping where I could with both money and support. Those 4 years were busy but wonderful. My apartment was cramped with 4 people, but none of us minded. There was always someone to talk to, always laughter in the halls. The kids would take turns cooking dinner, usually with disastrous results that led to us ordering takeout. We'd watch movies together on weekends, squished onto my old couch. It wasn't perfect, but it was family. Gradually, they started building their own lives. The twin who wanted to be a teacher got her degree and found a job at a local elementary school. Her sister used her business degree to open a hair salon. I helped her secure a loan for it. Their brother got accepted into medical school, deciding to become a pediatrician. One by one, they moved out, finding their own apartments and establishing their independence. I was proud of them, but I also made sure they knew they always had a home with me if they needed it. We still got together regularly for dinner, and they'd call me for advice or just to talk. They were doing well, really well, and it felt amazing to see them succeed despite everything they'd been through. Tom never reached out during those years. He made no attempt to know how his children were doing, what they were achieving, or who they were becoming. The kids didn't seem to miss him either. They had each other, they had me, and they had built a life that didn't include their father's negativity. Looking back at those years now, I realize how much we all grew. The scared, hurt children who showed up at my door with their bags packed had turned into confident, successful adults. And I had changed too. I'd always been content with my single life, but having them in it made everything fuller, richer somehow. We had created our own kind of family, not bound by conventional rules, but by choice and love. But life has a way of bringing the past back around, usually when you least expect it. We were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Last week was my birthday. The kids insisted on throwing me a party, and despite my protests about keeping it simple, they went all out. My nephew, now a successful pediatrician, rented a nice restaurant for the evening. The twins handled the decorations and guest list. It was perfect, until my phone buzzed with a message from Tom. I hadn't heard from him in 7 years. The message was short. "We need to talk about my children." At first, I ignored it. I was enjoying my party, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. But then the calls started coming in, aunts, uncles, cousins, all telling me how Tom had been posting about me online. According to him, I had stolen his children and was now stealing their money too. He had somehow found out about the party and the fact that his kids were doing well financially. Now he wanted back in their lives, claiming he had changed and missed them terribly. The timing couldn't have been more obvious. After the party, the kids presented me with a check. They had pooled their money together as a thank you for everything I'd done for them. I tried to refuse. I had never helped them expecting anything in return, but they insisted. "We'll never be able to repay you for the love and support you gave us," my nephew said, "but we want to show our appreciation." I posted about their gesture on social media, not thinking Tom would see it since he had blocked me years ago. But he must have created a new account or heard about it from someone else, because that's when everything exploded. Tom started calling me constantly. When I finally answered, he demanded that I help him reconnect with his children. "They listen to you," he said, as if their estrangement was just a simple misunderstanding I could fix. When I refused, he showed his true colors. "You turned them against me just to get their money," he accused. I lost my temper then. I told him exactly what I thought, that he was only interested in his children now that they had money, that if he had really changed, he would have reached out years ago, that he was still the same selfish person he'd always been. He hung up on me and immediately started posting about how I was keeping his children from him and stealing what should be his. Some relatives actually took his side at first. They said I was being cruel, that everyone deserves a second chance. But they didn't know the whole story. After talking it over with the kids, we decided to tell it. I made a long post detailing everything: how Tom had treated his children, the years of emotional abuse, the neglect, how he had never once reached out to them in 7 years. The kids added their own comments, sharing specific memories of their father's cruelty. Tom tried to deny it at first, but for every lie he told, the kids had a truth to counter it. One by one, his comments started disappearing as he realized he couldn't win this fight. He ended up blocking all of us again, but not before sending me one last message. "I hope you're happy now that everyone hates me." I didn't respond. There was no point. The kids and I had our own celebration that evening, ordering pizza and watching old movies like we used to do when they lived with me. "You're the only parent we need," my niece said, and I felt my heart swell. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes family isn't about blood or legal rights. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when it's hard. Tom might be their father, but he gave up the right to be their parent long ago. The money they gave me? I'm planning to put it aside for their future children's education funds. That's what real family does. We look out for each other, we plan for the future together, we keep the cycle of love and support going. Tom hasn't tried to contact us again, and honestly, we're all better for it. The kids are thriving in their careers, I'm proud of the adults they've become, and we've built something beautiful together. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. We're living proof of that.